This is going to be the best one that you've ever done.
This is going to be the best one that we've ever done.
It already is.
Rhiannon, thank you for joining me.
Hi.
You are a repeat guest. I think the first repeat guest that we've had on. So congratulations for that. We ran out of all other people to talk to. So here you are.
Fantastic.
But how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm
Awesome.
really happy to be back here for a second time.
Very cool. You called me last week after the maintenance conference, which I heard was a pretty solid event.
Yeah.
And you said, hey, there's some things that we should talk about.
Yeah.
And maybe part of a bigger discussion. And I know that there's a lot of people talking about this. We've been talking about it for like 10 years now or more, but it's still a conversation today. And so, which is interesting, right? Because maybe I think that there's been progress made in it, but maybe not the progress that we probably would have expected to see 10 years ago. So what is that conversation?
Yeah, so just got back from the maintenance conference. Was really excited to touch base with you for all the reasons. You were definitely missed.
Yes.
Everybody noticed that you weren't there. So I know you had some FOMO on your side of things.
I had a little bit of FOMO, but it's all right. We had something pop up here and just couldn't make it, but next year for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But it was the maintenance conference, and you and I have talked about this before, and I've said it to many people. It's one of my most favorite conferences because it's so rich in the attendee list, and it's rich in content, and you actually have time to talk through things. You know,
Sure.
Some of those bigger shows, they're great, but there's just a lot more going on, and it could be a little diluted just to get to some quality conversations and to be able to talk about what it is that you're there to do in
Sure.
aviation. So very excited to attend San Antonio, connect with a lot of people. I think the attendance was a little thinner than it has been in the past, but it was a really good start to getting back into that conference routine. And there were some of our favorites there to be able to talk through. So I was there with our Bluetail team, so able to go there and team up with Roy and Jake and really get a chance to introduce myself back into the aviation world with the Bluetail squad.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And congrats on the new gig.
Thanks.
How is that going?
It's going good. It was the word we keep using is serendipitous, and that the way that it all just kind of came together. I think that anytime that you start a conversation, it's very easy for you to keep talking about it and you get excited about it. If you know me, I start to talk very fast and very loud because I'm excited and passionate about it.
Sure.
You should pay attention to those flags. And so talking with Stuart and Roberto, the founders of Bluetail, that was just the way that it was. We just kept talking. It was a natural evolution. It was natural curiosity and then ideas, right? So I love the maintenance world. I love aviation. So it just kind of all came together in this really perfect storm.
Cool. Yeah, I've talked quite a bit with both Roberto and Stuart, and they were
You can
actually
call him Berto.
Berto.
He's okay with it.
Yeah, I always do that. But they were actually the first guests on this podcast.
Were they really?
Yeah, they were. So that was cool, and I've stayed in touch with those guys as they're continuing to grow and build new products and expand, and it's cool to see the gap that they're filling in this space around, digitization of records and digital record keeping, and maybe you could talk just a little bit about what the company does and maybe some of the benefits that customers are seeing through using this product. Yeah.
So what Bluetail does is it digitizes all of your aviation aircraft records back to birth. Mm-hmm. And what I'm seeing out there is it's completing the story because everybody is using software to track the maintenance of their aircraft at this stage in the game, whether it's a specific vendor or they're doing something homegrown. They're utilizing that for future forecasting and updating their aircraft records, right?
Right.
But what's not being captured is that history. And that's a big part of the conversation about, what I want to dive in with you is because every department around, you've got these stacks and stacks of paper, whether it's boxes shoved into a corner or it's these file bins, that they've got color coded or, it's in some firewall, fire safe vault area. But everybody's got paper and paper and paper. And you and I have had this conversation for so long as to, why is that? So we'll get into that in a second. But, where I step in now with the Bluetail team is I can finally help with that side of the story. For years, it was working with operators to move their aircraft over to a preferred system, maybe one that worked better for what their goals were. But the conversation of what do I do with the rest of my records? How do I capture some of this data better?
Right.
How do I access this better? That was always kind of left there of, it was just this known thing. But now there's a solution for it. And that's why I get so excited, because there finally is a solution to provide you with the access to go paperless, to go digital, put these records in your hands no matter where you are. So that's what, talking to Bluetail, that was knowing what their vision was, knowing that this is a real need out there, coming together with some just great minds and that are open to other ideas, because aviation still has some gaps that
Sure.
I think need to be filled. And we're here for it. We're here for that conversation. And that is like the 1-2 punch, right? Like the product is great. And there's a team that's willing to work together and come up with ideas and collaborate on how to make it even better.
Very cool.
I was a part of another team like that at one point. Yeah.
I remember those days. And so I know at the conference there was a session or a discussion, a panel, let's say.
Let's call it a panel.
Let's call it a panel around digital record keeping. And so and I know it was a heavily attended session. There was a lot of feedback. There were a lot of questions around it. Tell me maybe a little bit about what the topics were and maybe some of the questions that were popping up there.
Yeah. So that was why I quickly called you, coming back from the show was, 10 years ago, you and I sat in front of a lot of rooms. We kind of did a little tour.
Yeah, sure.
With the goal being, let's introduce, flight docs. Let's talk about e-signature. That was one of our key parts that we were talking into. And very quickly, those conversations, everywhere we went, turned into the e-signature conversation. And I don't know what your remembering is, but I remember looking out over these rooms. We were at a Hyatt up in Atlanta, and it just looked like everybody had their arms crisscrossed, across them. There was a lot of heads nodding, like, no, this is not going to happen. This is aviation. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
And back then, I mean, even I was like, wow, okay. It was a topic, and it's something that we have together, just through different conversations, reapproached.
Right.
So fast forward to this past week in San Antonio, and, we have this panel discussion about going digital. What are the benefits of it? Why should you consider it? How do you do it? Just kind of trying to hit it from all angles. And full disclosure, I was in the second row. I wanted to get really good pictures of Lee Brewster. And so I was in the second row. And as they're going through some of the conversation, my brain registered with, this is a no-brainer. Like this, this isn't anything revolutionary, right? Kind of like, I don't know why this is such a topic at this moment. But then we paused and we went into the audience to take questions, and that's when it started to get juicy. And I was really I even wrote down, I was like, gotta talk to Greg. Can't believe that, that we're still having this conversation. But it has switched, right? So
Sure.
It was a wide spectrum of ideas and opinions and feedback and different examples, and everybody wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit further. Everything from how do you do it? Like how do you do this?
Right.
What does the advisory circular say? What should we be concerned about?
Sure.
Does it affect different certificate holders? So like it just blew up with questions, and that's when I got fired up of like, oh my gosh, like we've been having this conversation a long time and it's still out there. So I think it's time to like, what can we do about it? What can we do to help people get across that speed bump of how do we do it?
Sure. Yeah. And so I know it is really interesting because we've been talking about this for so long. And like this trip to Atlanta, I think was in like 2012. So it would have been 10 years ago that we had technology that was able to, bring people close to or there on electronic signature and electronic record keeping. And when you talk about some of the regulations or the guidance around electronic record keeping, it goes back to like 2002, the original version of the advisory circular 120-78 was originally written in 2002, which gave guidance around electronic signature and security and redundancy and backup.
So we're on 10-year
terms, and
right?
so that was 20 years ago now that was originally written, which means that there was technology even back then that was starting to move in this direction that would give operators or maintenance providers the ability to sign
Did they even have
records.
iPhones back then? No, I think I had like a razor, like a hot
like
pink
razor.
Palm
Pilot was starting to come out back then.
When I first met you, I had a BlackBerry.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, I avoided ever having one of those. But then, there was another version of the advisory circular, 12078A, which was released in 2016, which a lot of people on the maintenance committee and that are part of the NBAA Maintenance Conference put a lot of work into in, trying to bring that up to date in accordance with some of the some other regulations, as well as, some of the more modern technology out there. There wasn't, iPads, Wi-Fi. All these things are, technology that's evolved quite a bit since 2002 and continues to evolve even since 2016. Yeah. That's 6 years ago. There's a lot that's happened since that point. And so it is really interesting that we're still having a lot of the same discussions. And I think that if I was to break that down into like 4 pillars or categories or whatever you want to call them, I think we're looking at and these are things that are pushing things forward, but there are also in some cases obstacles. Right. And so you have the people that are involved in the industry, you have the technology that's part of the industry, you have the financial aspect of things and like buying and selling both planes themselves as well as services and parts, and then you obviously have the regulatory aspect of things. And I think that when you talk about electronic record keeping and e-signature, all of these are very much intertwined.
Agreed.
And are affecting each other in some ways. And so I guess if we wanted to dig into like each one of those, starting with the people aspect, I think that there's some people that are obviously gung-ho about moving things forward and going electronic, and they've seen other industries that have moved into that area where you can buy a house, you can buy a car, you can buy whatever, you can really, most records nowadays are electronic. And so there are people moving that forward. There are also people in the industry that maybe have been around since, doing it and have done.
If it's not broke, right?
Yeah, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And, paper is the way. And, if I want to get my hands on that record, I can go in the cabinet and I could feel it.
Because I've done it 250 times,
right? And not discounting that, right? There is the feeling of security of having those records and having them available, and not wondering, are they up in the cloud somewhere?
Yeah.
What does that mean? And so there's definitely people that have held this from moving back, whether they were in maintenance or flight operations or on the broker side or from OEMs. And so I think that as time goes on, we are starting to see a change in people's minds changing that have been part of the industry. And then you also have people that are entering the industry, right? Yeah. And that are very familiar with the technology or come from other industries that this would,
it's everywhere, right? Like, there's people coming up in the last 10 years that this is just what they know, right? Everything should be easy. They have phones, they have their iPads with them. They're just used, they said, like, whether it's depositing money into a bank account, buying a car, like you're doing 90% of that electronically. And then you go into this incredible industry with these amazing aircraft that are flying in the sky, and there's a lot of paper behind it.
Right.
So I think what you were just saying, like that difference from what I saw with you that a long time ago to what I saw is most of the questions were proactive. And that's where my brain started to like ting a little bit. I was like,
Right.
okay, I didn't look at it from that angle, right? Like the regulatory, those conversations are there. There are guidelines that are out there supporting, different certificate and how to get there.
Right.
But I think you now have this industry that's like, okay, I'm open to it. It's everywhere you look, right? In any software that's out there now, this conversation comes up. How do I access it? How's it secure? Can I get rid of this? Can I get rid of this paper? Do I have to stop doing that? But now they're asking, how do I do it? And I discredited that in the past. I didn't realize that was going to be a part of it, of how do I physically and mentally do this in my department?
Sure.
What do I do? Other than like, hey, look around for some resources, right? There's companies out there to help you. But like, how do I adopt this? And how do I talk to my senior management about it? And I get them on board, because I'm probably going to have to pay for some support in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
But when you look at like, all right, so there's people, technology, regulatory, and financial aspect of it. I think those top two, the people and the technology, that is it, right? Because once we can give those guidelines, we can empower the people, we can support them with technology that's easy to absorb.
Right.
Makes sense, right? Then they can start communicating, because it is a powerful industry. And when everybody joins in and everybody's on the same page, some magical things happen. But coming off at the conference, I didn't just call you. I called quite a few other people. But talking to some of the people that attended it and trying to get their feedback. Like, how did you feel about that?
Right.
The overall gist that I got was want to have more conversation. Like, it was a good start, but there's more conversations. And, one of the operators out of Texas, I wrote it down. He was like, look, we need a best practices. We've got to have a best practices, and it needs to be backed up, and we all need to come to an agreement on this.
Right.
And, I think that that's something that should be done. And I don't think it's difficult to do.
Yeah, well, I think, as you obviously when you're talking about going electronic, technology has to be involved, right?
Right.
And I think that one of the why technology is obviously it's the avenue to get there, but it's also the obstacle today, is because when you look at aviation today and business aviation, there's still a lot of silos that exist with the software, right? When you're looking at maintenance tracking software, flight operations software, where you're keeping all of the records. And also that, maybe I'm a Part 91 flight department or a charter operator, and I do, let's say, 50% of my work in-house, and the other 50% is being done at a service center, maybe at Standard Air or Westar, wherever it may be. Or, I'm even working with, I had a tire changed out on the field in Fort Lauderdale by, a random contractor, right?
Right.
And so these people aren't all working on the same platform. And so there's a disconnect between, if you were doing everything in-house, I think it would be a lot easier of a discussion on like, how do you go electronic? But I think that that's one of the obstacles that we're facing, is that there's things that are being done that are really outside your control as the operator.
That leap between the silos is what you're saying is that paper necessity, right? Like, I'm in this silo on this platform or this resource. I have to get that data from here to here. Just print it.
Just print it.
We'll
get that record and we'll stick it in our file cabinet. We have one record like this. We have another record like that. It's kind of like a mix and match. And I think that in talking to a lot of people and in the discussions that I've had, that's one of the bigger obstacles to overcome. And ideally, we get to a place where we're in a more type of integrated world where it doesn't matter what system you're working on. That flow of information can move freely.
That's further down the road.
For sure. That might be a little bit of a pipe dream at this point, especially the way that the different organizations kind of look at each other as competitors. But we have to utilize or kind of mix and match the technology to get there.
Well, I think what you just said was there was two different options there, or two different scenarios, right? So you've got the one scenario that's fully paperless, right? Few and far between, fully paperless. They've digitized all of their historical records. They have a, electronic system supporting them on the operations side, on the maintenance side, and everything has got a beautiful API somewhere in the middle, and everything is pushing and pulling, right? So that's the one scenario. That I think is what you're saying is like that.
Sure.
That's further down the road. That's pipe dream, right? The other one is you have somewhat of both, right? So that you have the paper, that is the structural workflow that's been there forever, and you've adopted some of the electronic, but at the end of the day, you end up printing that back off, and you still have those paper.
Sure.
So do you think that, I think that one's going to be the first milestone of...
Yeah, I think so. And I think that there's great options between, the technology that's out there to get to where, there's still paper involved in the process, but when you talk about your records, they're electronic. And that's possible today with, mixing and matching a few different products out there. And so, this isn't something that we're talking about you can do years down the road. I think that it's possible today. I think back to your point about the best practices side of things, I think that that's where it gets a little tricky in that in a lot of our conversations or talking to operators about the technology, the operators are looking at the technology companies and saying, how do we do this? Or does your product get us here? And so the product only solves kind of one piece of the puzzle in regards to the technology. The other piece has to do with, when you look at the advisory circular out there for electronic signatures, electronic record keeping, there's a whole lot of stuff. I don't know what the breakdown is on like percentage, but there's let's call it a 50-50 split. Part of it is what can the technology do? The other half is really about creating procedures and best practices within your operation. And so it's tough because when you look at a technology partner that really only provides one piece of the puzzle, they can't deliver you those processes and procedures on a silver platter because in reality, they don't know your operation. They don't know the ins and outs of it. They don't know about your team, your structure. And so I think that's one of the difficulties that the operators are facing and why they're still asking these questions is because it's not an easy thing to tackle. And so we've seen organizations that have made a big push for it and have put in the time and the commitment to making it work. When you look at every flight department out there, they may not have the resources to say like, we're gonna do this. And
time and commitment's a very real thing. I mean, everybody's always been busy, but it's kind of even more so, at this time in history.
Yeah. So I think those are kind of the two big things. Obviously, the regulatory side of it, plays into
always
this.
Be there.
But there's guidance on it. I think the other big thing that I believe was talked about at this panel, but I've had plenty of conversations about it, is around the local regulators or the local FSDOs, is that everyone so is a kind of a joke, each one is independently owned and operated, and so while some of them are completely open to this, there are some that
are completely not.
And so I think that there needs to be some work done around that on unfortunately having the public actually educating the regulators on the regulations that are out there, and so that's another obstacle that I think everybody is facing, is that they can't get necessarily good answers from their FAA representatives, right?
I think, it's becoming a hotter and hotter topic, and some of the examples that people gave out there, horror stories about when their records have become compromised, when they've been put in these situations, right? The value of your aircraft, that's a big number. So Are you willing to put that on the line? Are you willing to, to jeopardize not only the aircraft, but what the aircraft is there to do within your organization, right? Like, are you there to support making sure the aircraft is ready to go when your principals, when the organization needs it? Are you doing the things internally to make sure that your flight department is on top of what it needs to be? That is it, right? Where I think people are starting to see that more and more. Why is there a delay? Well, I have to go look for something. Or I'm not even just like looking for something internally. Now think about like just traveling.
Sure.
Right? You're going international. You're going to take all of this with you. How are you going to access those records? Or you said like a contractor.
Right.
So you think, this is all intertwined. When you said technology, we talked about it a little bit ago of people just feeling a little inferior when it comes to learning new software, right? And they just don't feel like they're tech savvy or that they can do that, or I'll just keep doing it the way that I am because that seems a little scary to me, It's a lot of education and it's a lot of being open to asking for that type of support. But you said like going back to how do we provide the industry with best practices? What needs to happen for that to appear and to be able to support this leap?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you had mentioned the value of the aircraft. And that's where, it said the third pillar of this would be the finance aspect of it and the financial implications of it, right? And so I think that there's a lot of questions when it comes to, brokers are still very heavily involved in the process. And so, you may be comfortable with having electronic records is your broker, is the buyer, right?
Does it change the perception of value of your aircraft?
Sure.
Right? Like if I come to you and I say, you're interested in buying my aircraft over this aircraft, the exact same, so to speak, right? Is there a perception as you, the buyer, if I have both? Here's all my paper, here's my digital as well. Or if I'm just like, no, everything's digital. Does that work for or against the perceived value of your aircraft?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that that's an open question depending on it's
a personality too.
Who you ask, right? Because if it were me personally, I'd love to see all of those records, digitized.
Right.
And if you talk to a lot of the brokers out there, they're very happy to get all of the records electronically. And when you're talking about, doing a pre-buy inspection, when all of that is there, it's organized, it's searchable, the quality of that pre-buy inspection is going to be significantly better. It's a lot easier to uncover.
Again, make it easy, right?
Issues and make sure that those records are complete. When you're talking about doing it all paper, that's tough. We're talking about thousands and thousands of pages of records. That's a lot to sort
just
through.
like natural, right? It deteriorates, right? It's paper, right? I mean, at
sure.
some point, right? Like, even though you've got it, protected with baby kittens surrounding it and all that good stuff, like it does start to deteriorate at some point. But that goes into another part of the conversation. And I think identifying these four as topics such I'm sure the aviation industry would love to weigh in on how does it work for you and how does it work against you. One of the operators out of Texas said, 22 boxes showed up in a FedEx truck after we bought our aircraft. And it was just kind of like, why do I have this? But nobody is ready to make the decision to say, you know what, you don't need this anymore. Scan it, shred it, and we're good to go. Nobody is at this point where they can confidently say, I will never need those again.
Sure.
Some people think that that's the way it is, but that's it, right? Like, so we continue to tote around all of this paper, which is it just dead weight? Does it add value?
Right. Sure.
Is it slowing the process down, slowing people down?
I would think so. But that's my perspective, right? And so
we share the same perspective.
Yeah. And so I think, there's obviously a lot of obstacles here. There's also a lot of people that are interested in overcoming those obstacles. And I think, we wanted to do this as maybe a little bit of a preemptive discussion to kind of throw out what are some of those problems and some of the things that we're hearing and some of the some of the people that are involved in kind of progressing this this discussion and moving the industry towards.
How do you honor each one of those pillars, right?
And so what we wanted to do was, get some other people involved in this discussion, and maybe it's an ongoing discussion that we have. So we're going to be planning something around that to have a discation with maybe it's the two of us.
It's ready. The industry's ready.
Yeah,
you know what
sure.
I mean? Like we've waited for this. Like they're ready. Let's help get these conversations together. Let's bring the experts in this aviation industry together, and let's talk about what do we need to do? What needs to happen to support this industry and taking it to the next level? Yeah.
So I think the people that we want to talk to are going to be different players from within the industry that maybe have different roles. And so if you're listening to this and you want to get involved in this, to either maybe raise some questions about some of the things that you've been encountering, or if you're interested in providing feedback on some of the wins that you've had in implementing this. So whether you're in the maintenance side of the world,
both the wins and losses.
Yeah, sure. We kind of want to be able to bring some real information to the table, rather than us two just talking about the problems of it.
But people love to hear us talk about problems.
I know. But so, whether you're an operator, whether you're a broker, whether you are a regulator, an owner, if you're hearing this and you want to get involved in this and be able to share your story, give us a shout. We'd be happy to talk and see if there's ways that we can get this information out there.
We have some ideas, and we want to hear from the people who live it and breathe it all day long. The very first time we ever did this, I made you put up a photo of yourself surfing to try to let the industry know us a little bit better. I think we've evolved from there, and so has the industry.
You can still put up a picture if you want.
Well, I'm excited for this. I'm excited that I'm still around to be in this industry and to see it kind of progress in the right direction, and that people are open to it now, and that they're looking for solutions. So let's keep the conversation going. Let's make some change.
Cool. I'm excited about it, but
I can tell.
Yeah. Thank you for stopping by. It was good to dive back into this stuff and get my brain going back on it, because it's been a minute since we've really dug into it. But we're going to be continuing this discussion, so keep an eye out for it. Probably going to be doing something on a live stream, and getting people involved, where you can get involved in Q&A and all that good stuff. So stay posted.
That'd be great. Well, thank you as always.
See ya.
Had a good time. Bye.